What do y'all think about it? Woo, I'm hot. What do you guys think about that? Good morning. Good morning. We got a great day today because right now our one of our campus ministries, Christian Campus Fellowship, CCF, is on retreat. They're out there having a good time doing their retreating thing. I don't know what they do on retreat, but they always come back fired up, and that's what I like about that. But I'm glad that you chose to be here today. Are you excited to be here today? My name is Dorsey. I lost my name tag, and I'm the pastor here, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. That little video there, I love that video clip because some people don't know anything about football. Can you believe that? Oh, you can believe that? You don't know anything. But now, does anybody know what today is? And it's not Groundhog's Day. I'm going to go ahead and say that. What is today? Super Bowl Sunday. What number of Super Bowl is it today? 52. So y'all been watching the commercials and all. I mean, I like that. 52 is the commercials, or is the Super Bowl number that we're on today. And so the question I have for you is, do you have to have a knowledge about football, knowledge about the NFL, knowledge about who's playing in the Super Bowl, which, by the way, who's playing in it? It really doesn't matter because the Falcons aren't. That's what we're upset about. But the Patriots and New England, the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. But to have a Super Bowl experience, do you have to know a whole lot about football and all? Do you? No? Does anybody here, would they admit to not knowing much about football? Okay, there we go. Everybody, okay, so, but you do have to have an understanding about some things. Okay? Here's some things that you need to understand. I'm going to give you some basic things to understand, or knowledge, and we'll talk about the difference between knowledge and understanding in a minute, but here's the basics. First of all, there's going to be a game. Okay? There is a game today. It is about, they're going to do football. There is also commercials. There's a bunch of commercials going to be on, and then there's the halftime show. It is one of the only times that in the professional world of the National Football League that the actual halftime show will be shown. You understand what I'm saying? Most times they have a halftime show at every game. You only see this one. This is the only one you really see. And then here's the most important thing of all about today's Super Bowl, okay? As soon as the Super Bowl's over with, This Is Us is coming on the TV show. And anybody watch This Is Us? Yeah, and we're going to find out what happens in that fire. So that's what I'm excited about. But the other thing you need to understand is there's food, there's fellowship with friends, there's people making predictions. There's the Puppy Bowl. Anybody heard of the Puppy Bowl? So there's this Puppy Bowl going on, so everybody, woohoo, give it up for the puppies, you know. But here's my point. Sometimes we think that if we know more about something, it makes it better or helps us in living or something. If I knew more about the Super Bowl or about the facts or about the things. But let me give you a couple facts. I'm going to give you some knowledge that I hope we can transfer to understanding. Do you know why the commercials are so critical on this day? Does anybody, why, Preston? Say it again. You saying it real fast, but slow down. It's better to have more money? Now, let me give you why the commercials. So here's why the commercials are important. Do you know how many people watched last year's Super Bowl? How much? 100 and almost 12 million. 111.9 million people. You get this? 112 million people. A couple years ago, when Seattle was playing the Patriots, almost 115 million people tuned in to the Super Bowl. In fact, do you know how much they're estimating the Super Bowl ads for 30 seconds? 30 seconds. You can hold your breath for 30 seconds, right? Yeah. $5 million for a 30-second spot. Add that in with all the other things that they do to prep up for the advertisements, everything for the Super Bowl. You're talking about a lot of money invested in. Why? Because of this one fact, that broadcasters know that this is one event that people tune into to see the commercials. They don't fast forward through them. They don't TiVo them out. They watch the commercials, right? We used to have a Super Bowl party, and we were going to watch the commercials. We're going to rate the commercials. They know these things. But again, you don't have to have a knowledge of football to understand and enjoy the Super Bowl experience. See, knowledge and understanding is not the same thing. Knowledge and understanding is not the same thing. I can have a knowledge of something but still not understand it. I can have the knowledge of it's raining outside but still not understand why it's raining. Young child will know its knowledge is it's raining and it's wet and it's miserable, but does it understand why the rain happened, where it came from? You tracking with me? Knowledge and understanding are two different things. I can know my multiplications table. You understand that statement? But I can not understand how to use them when I go to buy 5 apples at 10 cents each, which would be how much, Marley? 50 cents. So you understand the application of the knowledge of the multiplication table and the application. Understanding is different. Understanding involves conceptualization and association. Understanding is an awareness of the connection between the pieces of information that are presented and has a deeper level than knowing. You can know what the puzzle pieces look like, but you have to have an understanding of how the pieces fit together. You understand? Square peg won't go in a round hole. You can know that's square and you can know this is round, but you have to understand they don't fit in there the way they are. So here's my point. Though knowledge can happen quickly, understanding comes over time. And so what I've found in my life is that what I don't understand can become a barrier to my success or my improvement. Not what I know, but what I don't understand. It's not what I don't know that hurts me as much as what I don't understand that hurts me more or keeps me from understanding and keeps me from taking or being successful, or what we would say in the terms is keep me from having extreme ownership. What I don't understand can be a barrier to extreme ownership of a couple of things. Number one, it can be a barrier to our relationship with God. What you don't understand about God could be a barrier with your relationship with God. You can know about God. You know of Him. You can spell His name. You can spell it frontwards and backwards. But what you don't understand can be a barrier to you and your relationship with God. What you don't understand about Jesus can affect your relationship with God. What you don't understand about others. You can know others, but what you don't understand about others can affect your relationship with them. Many people know God, many people know about Jesus, and many people know about Christianity, but not many people understand what it is to be a Christian. They really don't understand God. They really don't understand Jesus, and so they walk around in their knowledge, whatever that limited amount is of that knowledge, and they lack understanding, so they get comfortable in their knowledge, but struggle with not understanding, and therefore they struggle in life with their relationship with God, with Jesus, and with others. I would suggest to you that being a Christian is about improving in each of these areas of our life. Improving with our relationship with God, improving with our relationship with Jesus, improving with our relationship with others. And if understanding is a barrier, or lack of understanding is a barrier, then we need to work on more understanding about these things rather than more knowledge of these things. You see, we are more likely to take extreme ownership with something that we have an understanding of rather than just having a knowledge of it. So today, as we continue in our message series called Extreme Ownership, we're talking about the extreme ownership of these three things, most especially the two things: our relationship with God and our relationship with Jesus. And we feel like that our extreme ownership of those, taking ownership of that and living into it, of our relationship with God and relationship with Jesus will affect positively our relationship with others. So we focus on those two. And so a critical component, over the last several weeks, we've been talking about different components. One was our attitude, that you got to have an ownership attitude rather than a renter's attitude about your relationship. It's not like I'm just using this and I'm not going to have to be responsible for it. So there's a difference. We talked about that. So our attitude and our approach about our relationship with God and with Jesus are important. It's not something that we can just take lightly. We have to be aware and take ownership in it, that it's not just God or Jesus' responsibility. We have a responsibility for it. But today we want to talk about another component that a lot of people know about but really don't understand. And it's a crucial component to develop your relationship, to be able to develop your relationship with God or with Jesus, to develop your relationship with others, in fact, but a crucial element to take extreme ownership in. So you must take extreme ownership in this piece of the puzzle in order to take extreme ownership in the whole of your relationship with God and Jesus. And this piece of the puzzle is your prayers, your prayer life. See, a lot of people know about prayer, and they know prayer, but we struggle with understanding prayer. And I'm going to suggest to you that through the course of this message, that understanding is something that we achieve or we come to through obedience. Through a series of things, but through obedience of what God calls us to do. So I want to talk to you about a couple things. I want to talk to you about an example that I found in the Bible. An example that we're working out of the book of Exodus, and this example in Exodus, I think, gives us several points of a prayer life, of a way that we can use and pull out of this story of what to help us understand prayer. Okay, that's my objective. So here's where the story starts. Moses has led the Israelites out of captivity to the Egyptians through a various number of plagues that God had performed to convince Pharaoh to let the people go. Now that's found in the early chapters of Exodus, and you can read that and get that whole story. But just understand this, for 440 years this group of people were captive, which means generation after generation after generation after generation were slaves. They thought, ate, drank, and lived as a slave. They did not eat, think, and drink and live free. So their prayer life was the prayer life of a slave. Their prayer life was not of a free person, but of a slave. Now understand that. Whatever prayer life that they have. And understand, if you've been enslaved for 440 years, or your family has been enslaved, there was a lot of prayers that was lifted up to say, I want to be out of slavery, God. Where are you? Deliver me from this. And a lot of years that it didn't happen. But right now, it's happened. And this generation, whoever this group of people is, are the generation that have seen several plagues occur that caused Pharaoh to let them go. Plagues that were focused on the Egyptians and not on the Jewish people. And so now they fled, and all they've got is the clothes on their back that they got from the Egyptians. They got some gold and some money from the Egyptians. That they basically ransacked them. And as they left, they come to this place where they meet the Red Sea. And they have no boats. They have no rafts. They have no woods to build anything with. They have nothing but these things that they're carrying. Children, babies, everything, a little bit of food, and they're at this water, and they cannot go forward. And for some reason, Pharaoh's heart, God enticed or caused or led, or Pharaoh chose for his heart to be hardened. And after these series of events, Pharaoh decides, I want those people back. In fact, I don't care if I get them back, I'm killing them. They're done. So he's after them to do that. Now, as he's bearing down on them, the people look this direction and they see water. We can't get through. We're stuck. They look this direction and they see Pharaoh and his chariots coming after them. You get the picture? 600,000 people or more. You with me? Animals, whatever, and that's a lot of stuff. Exodus 14 verse 10 says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, so the first thing they do is they cry out to God, they pray, and then they talk to Moses. Their relationship with God, their relationship with others. They said to Moses, was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us up into the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone? Let us serve the Egyptians. We would have been better off for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Do you get that? It would be better for us to remain slaves than it would be to be free, because now you have me in a place I've never been. You have me in a place that I don't understand. I can't see an answer. I can't see a solution. Listen, over here every day I knew I do what the boss says or I get beat. Do you understand? I know this. I don't understand why the Egyptians are rulers over us. I don't understand how we got into slavery or slavery. Do you understand? All I know is I get up, I go to work, I come back, that's it. I know these things. But now you got me over to this place, I don't understand. I'd have been better off to be in my knowledge than to be free over here and not understand. And so Moses answered the people, and he said, do not be afraid. Oh, he's a great encourager. Moses, the man who goes and talks to God. Do not be afraid. The Lord will bring you today. What do you say? The Lord will stand firm. Oh, excuse me. Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see with your own eyes the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians will see you today. The Egyptians that you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to do what? What does that say? Be still. You need only to do what? Be still. Be still. Moses is telling them, God's going to do something. Just be still. I encourage you, don't be afraid, but don't be afraid and be still. Now, a couple of things that we find here that I think are critical in our prayer life. First thing is, you got to believe there's a God. You got to believe there's a God. That's who they're crying out to. They believe God. And when you believe there's a God, you have to do what these people did. You have to show up. You understand what I mean? You have to show up at the prayer. You cannot tap out for somebody else to do all the prayer for you. You have to do the one. Who did it say was crying out? They were crying out. They didn't say, Moses, you go cry out to God for us. They cried out. See, many times we want to give everybody else a list of our prayer concerns for our own lives, but yet we're not praying for it ourselves. Pray for my children, pray for my grandma, pray for this other, and pray for these things, and yet we aren't praying for these. We understand, we know that prayer is important, but we don't understand that I'm a part of it. And I need to show up. That I need to believe that there's a God. I need to show up. And I need to understand that participation helps me to understand what God's will is in my life. So once we believe there's a God and once we show up, then we need to talk. We need to ask God. We need to ask God, and notice that what Moses told him was a couple things. He told the people, he said, take courage. Don't be afraid. Some of us in this room, we need to have courage to go and pray to God. That's just the truth of it. We're afraid. What's God going to say? What if I get over here in this unknown area of a new prayer life where I've been over here just doing this and whatever I say, my God is great, God is good, let us thank you for our food, by his hands we are. I say those prayers, you understand what I'm saying? The prayers that we got memorized, you asked me to go over here and pray for something I don't have memorized. You with me? That's unknown. And when we ask people to do that, you got to take courage. It takes courage to go to that spot. It takes courage. Now let me tell you, when you're leaving Egypt, we're just glad to get the heck out of Egypt. It don't take much courage. I'm like, whoa, I'm out of here. Now you get out here and it's a little tougher than what you thought. Now it takes courage. Now you start to think, I'd be better off to be a slave. I'd be better off not to have a prayer life than I would be to have one. I'd be better off to just depend on everybody else to pray for me. And I'd be better off that I only pray for myself and I'm not one of those people that pray for others. And so we don't understand about the prayer. We know these things, but we don't understand. It takes courage. And the other thing that Moses says, remember what God told us. You've already seen what He's done. You've seen the signs. You've seen the plagues. You've seen this. You know that He said these other things, that He's going to do this for us. I don't know what it looks like. But He said it. Remember. So He's telling us to refer back to times when God has answered our prayers. And listen, every one of us has got at least one prayer God's answered. At least one. We just may have forgotten. So He said, take courage, and He said, remember. And then it goes on in verse 15, it says, then the Lord said to Moses, this cracks me up every time. Then the Lord said, so what did Moses tell him? You be still, take courage. And then He says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. What was Moses' last word to him? Be still. And God saying, what are you crying out to me? Move. But there's this disconnect. There's water. It's like we don't swim. There wasn't many swimming pools in Egypt. We didn't learn how to doggy paddle. We drank water. You understand? We washed with a little bit of water. We live in a dead-burned desert. We don't know this water stuff. The Nile River, we went in there periodically. We don't know how to swim. You with me? And so He says, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I'm just going to let that track. Dude, the last time I used this staff with water, the Nile River turned to blood. The last time I threw it on the ground, it turned into a serpent, a snake. Now you're telling me to do something that I've never seen done before? You're telling me to get over here in the place where I'm just caught in this, and you're asking me to step out and do something with what I already have that I've never done before. I've never seen this before. He continues to encourage him. He says, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so they will go after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his armies, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And this is something I'm picking up now, he's saying, the Israelites are going to know, they're going to understand because of their faith. They're not going to know, they're going to understand. But he said, these guys are going to know. See, the Egyptians are going to move to a knowledge of God. They're not ready to move to an understanding God. They believe God is like every other God. He ain't. They're about to get a true knowledge of God. And it ain't going to take any faith on their part because they're going to see it. Several thousand chariots go out there, several thousand horsemen, several thousand men march out there, and all the wives and all the families all back in Egypt waiting on them, and they don't come back. They're going to know something happened out there. Because the people that are Egyptians that are out there, they're going to be dead. You tracking with me? When the water closes up, it gets all of them. All the people back home know is they chased after them and they didn't come back. And then they know these are the things that God did to get the people to leave. They have a knowledge of God. Not an understanding. But the Israelites are going to have an understanding because they will see it. When they walk through, they will see it. So here's a couple other things that I want to pull out. Moses does something that we all need to do in our prayer life. Not just believe God and not just ask God and take courage to speak to God and to remember what He's done in the past, But he listened to God. Moses spoke to God and then shut up. Did you get that? It says, Moses, why? And actually God's like giving him that hint. Why are you crying out to me? He's like, oh, shut up. Get moving. See, we need to learn that when we get to this area and we are in our prayer life and we begin to pray to God, we need to be quiet after a few words and listen to God. And you say, well, he's never spoken to me before. Maybe he has, but you haven't shut up. That's me, because my list is about yay long that I'm praying for, because I'm asking for it, and some of them I repeat back about 50 times, because obviously he didn't hear it because he didn't do it. You understand what I'm saying? Anybody else like that? Yeah. I'm like, I want to get out of this, get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt. And then I keep hearing, God, I need you to help me get out of debt. Stop spending, Dorsey, stop spending. No, God, you don't understand. Get me out of debt, get me out of debt. Step in here. Do this for me. See, what we have to do is understand. To gain understanding is when we listen to God, we have to listen even when it's not what we expected to hear. And even when it's uncomfortable to hear. See, most of us shut down at that point. And we say, it would be better to be back over here in slavery than to hear that you want me to be a part of this. Because I wasn't expecting that. I just want you to fix it for me, God. I just want you to do these things. I don't, take the hand off the steering wheel. You do it. And God's like, you have a part of this. And what the next thing is that Moses trusts God. His trust is so strong in God that he does this crazy thing. He doesn't turn around and go back to Pharaoh and bow down and say, oh, forgive us, our bad, we messed up, have mercy on us. He didn't do that. He stood before this water in a place he's never been, never seen. However it is that he's there, he trusts God enough to obey, and he holds up his staff. He holds up his staff. See, we've got to get to the point where we trust and obey. See, trust happens when you're at the water and you do a first part, right? And obedience is what? What else did he tell Moses to do? When you hold this up, the water's going to split, and then what did he tell the people to do? Move on. Get going. What are you standing around for? There's people, I would say to you right now, that's in your life that's waiting on you to do this and pray. To lift up prayers, to trust God. And when you do, they're looking for you to move on because they're going to follow you. 600,000 people moved through the water. But they wouldn't have moved without what? Moses. And who is the closest one to understanding God? Moses. They have forgotten. They are watching him. People are watching you as the Christians of the world today and seeing how your prayer life is. And the sad part is they're mimicking your prayer life for the most part. And that's why there's no power. Because we get here to this spot and we go to a certain part of asking God and doing these things, and then we don't obey because it's something we didn't want to hear. Or it's something uncomfortable to hear. And therefore we stay in our knowledge and we don't move on through the waters of obedience to get to understanding God or understanding Jesus. So we got to get moving. So listen to God, trust and obey God, and get moving. And again, get moving doesn't mean stand still. Moses had it to a certain point because he told them. See, Moses, at that point, his understanding was growing. He said, stand still, God's about to do something. He knew this, but he said, stand still. But it's because of his continued conversation with God, he finds out now it's time to move. See, there's a time to stand still, and there's a time to move. See, some of us pray to God and He says, be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. And so what we do is we stop praying because we think that's what He's going to say all the time. But if we would have said it the next time, He'd say, get moving. You understand where I'm coming from? Or do you know where I'm coming from? I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And listen to this. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. And all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. I want you to understand, 600,000 people walking through the mud would be a mess. You think, oh, just part the waters, it's good. You ever walked on the real close to the seashore and you sort of slop up in that? You know what I'm talking about? You ever been in the water and it gets bogged down? 600,000 people get to walking through there. You know what that's going to be called? Quicksand. He blows a wind not just to pull the waters back, but to dry the land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on the right and a wall on their left. And the water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. And guess what? When they were here at the edge of the water, God told them that's what's going to happen. But you ain't going to find out till you trust and obey and move. And those three things. See, some of us got trust. Some of us got a lot of trust in God. We write it on our dollar bills. In God we trust. We just lack the obeying and moving on. And that's what's hurting us right now. It's hurting us in our families. It's hurting us in our relationships with our work. It's hurting us in our school. It's hurting us in it's hurting us in all over. It's hurting us in our nation. Because we just sit right there and we just trust and we lack the obedience to move on. Said, but the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on the right and wall on the left. That day, on that day, the Lord saved Israel. What did He do on that day? He saved Israel. One more time. What did He do on that day? When did their salvation come? After they trust and obeyed and moved on. After they believed, after they listened, after they showed up, after they trust, after they obeyed and moved on, were they saved. And on that day, the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians. And the Israelites saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. When the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, just hang on a minute, I'm just going to say it. When the Israelites saw, when did they see? After they obeyed, after they moved on. Because you know what you see before that? Water. You understand? You see water and you see the Egyptians. But when you follow what God is saying and you trust and obey and you step out and you move on through those waters of uncertainty, not knowing and listening to what God says, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not what you want to hear, you will see your sign. The sign that comes from obedience. Then the people feared the Lord. I don't think they went, ooh, we're scared. I think they went, you know what another word I think is to put here for feared? It says, then they feared the Lord and put their trust in Him and in Moses his servant. You know what I think a word is to use here? Then the people understood the Lord. And they put their trust in the Lord. See, understanding doesn't happen in the front of your window of the car. That's knowledge. Understanding happens in the rearview mirror of your car. That's where you've already obeyed and you've already moved on. And that's the way it is with your prayer life. Understanding comes on the other side of obedience. And when we obey God, when we go through these things in our prayer life, when we obey, then God gives us our sign. Now, some will say, preacher, you don't understand. I've prayed for my financial situation for years and it's not changed. Then I would say, are you listening to what's being said? Because when you're praying and you seek God with your whole heart and you seek Him, He will. See, you can know this. You understand what I'm saying? You can know this. But do you understand this? Let me give you another illustration. Close out here. Do you think that Jewish boys prior to Jesus' birth had ever prayed? Yes or no? Do you think a Jewish child would have been taught to pray? We know that history says that they prayed before meals, that they prayed for their Passover. There's certain prayers. There were certain prayers that they had memorized. Anybody ever memorized a prayer? God is great. God is good. What? Keep going. Good God, good food. No, what is it? Good food. Good food, good food, good meat, good God, let's eat. That's another one somebody's got memorized, right? God our Father, we give thanks for our many blessings, Amen. That's what we're doing for our grandchildren now. That's one of them that we're praying, right? We know the prayer. These Jewish young men knew prayer. And they became followers of Jesus. But they noticed something different about Jesus' prayer life. To the point that one day they went up to Jesus and said, Jesus, teach us to pray. And Jesus began to teach them a prayer. You may know it. I bet you in the locker rooms of these two teams, this prayer will be said at some point today. I bet you in the broadcast booth that this prayer is being said sometime today. The referees sometimes say this prayer before they go out there. There may be some advertisers praying this prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. This story, this prayer, was knowledge. The prayers that they had before were knowledge, but Jesus' prayers were something different. So Jesus teaches them, you have to move from this knowledge prayer to this understanding of prayer. He wasn't teaching them the Lord's Prayer to know, but to help them understand. And I would say this to you today. I cannot tell you the number of people who are not even professing Christians who say that prayer because they know it, not because they understand it. What if you would be different? What if you would be the group that had come through struggles and trials and being enslaved in your old prayers, in your memorization? What if you stepped out in faith and you began to believe that God could change you? Don't worry about everything else. Let's change me. Save me. See, you can't. We said this last week. Moses had to be rescued before Moses could rescue the Israelite nation. Moses was enslaved himself. He was living in a world of injury, the pain associated with injury. And he moved to the pain of discomfort of improving. So what if we moved out of our old prayer life into this new one, in this uncharted water, and begin to trust God? I believe that you will see a sign. I believe that we will see a sign. I believe that families will change. I believe that things will be different. And that's why we started a prayer service on Sunday nights. Last week was the first one we ever had. We just showed up in this prayer service. Played a little bit of music in the background, and I'm just telling you this to tell you what it was like. And we just come up and prayed. Some people prayed in their seats. Some people prayed at the altar. People left when they finished praying, but it was just a prayer time. Because I felt at the water and Pharaoh behind me, this is what I was supposed to do as your pastor. Because we disconnected. That I disconnected and we disconnected with God. And that's the best way I know to start is at prayer. And so we prayed. And despite tonight being the Super Bowl, I'm doing it again at 7 o'clock. And if you want to come, you can come. Listen, I want you to come if you want to come, or don't come if you don't want to come. Your call. But those that come, we'll see what happens tonight. We'll pray. We might have a list to pray for people. I don't know what we're going to. We're going to pray. I mean, it is that. But I'm going to be obedient. Do you understand where I'm coming from? I'm going to be obedient. Because I've been too many times I've been disobedient. And I think understanding to come on the other side of that obedience. And we're going to do it again next week, and we're going to do it again the next week, and we're going to do it again because I believe that is the key to revival in our lives, in our families, in our church, in this community, is that component of prayer and taking extreme ownership of that.